right, great people. The 6th day of October 2022, 4 days away from Huduma Day, commonly known as Moi Day, which is on Monday. And of course, another great month, another great day, the 4th day of our great debates here. Changamkia Climate. That is the hashtag that we are using. But then you can also say Youth for Climate Debates, the debates which are happening in preparation for the COP27 happening in Africa. Day one, we were here with a great team of debaters talking about climate change communication. We came back on day two on Tuesday. That was the 4th day of this month. The 4th day of, the 4th day of this month on a Tuesday. We talked about climate change and food security. We were here yesterday with another great panel: Francis Omolo, Jeremy Atambo, Rosie Omondi, and Francis and Paul Muhisa. The talk was around climate change and energy. And during that session, we talked about how we cook at our places, the lights we use, and even the means of mobility, how all these things powered. Today, we are back for our final day of these great debates. We are talking about climate change and our Kenyan politics. Where does it fit? Kenyan politics into climate change talks, or climate change talks into our Kenyan politics? We're going to ask ourselves quite a number of questions. Like, have you ever had your own MCA or member of parliament or woman representative talk about climate change? Talking about climate just in generally, is it even a part of their conversation? We are talking about should this be an agenda in a campaign? Should this be a reason for someone to wake up, go campaign? Is it something that as young people we can organize ourselves smartly around and make sure that is being talked about? But in the meantime, let me take this time to introduce our great panel of the debaters. Remember, these debates are brought to you by CAMD Voices in close partnership with Hansel Foundation and Regional Sustainability Network. My name is Okoto Pondo from CAMD Voices, and to the great panelists, I'll start with the gentleman on the panel.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go on.
Well, I'm of the opinion that politics and policies and the policymakers in general can be used.
I know we people love this topic so much. Just introduce yourself, your name, and where you are joining us
Uh,
from.
I'm sorry, nimezoea hii kitu. My name is Simon Kamau. I'm joining you guys from USIU Africa. I'm a student here studying pharmacy. And my take on the matter is that while politics, policies, and policymakers
Just
can be
introduction
used.
will come back. We will come back to that.
Oh,
It
sorry,
looks like you're
I did
so
not hear.
eager for this conversation. Okay,
Bana,
this is Simon joining us from United States International University. Thank you so much, Simon. Fifi.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Fiona, joining you from Juja, a student at Jomo Kenyatta University, pursuing pharmacy.
Joining from Juja. Simon, where did you say you're joining us from? Not the area where you are right now?
Kasarani.
Kasarani. When you're not in Kasarani, where is your home county?
Nairobi.
Nairobi. Okay, perfect. To the lady in green, I think I'm right. This is green. Introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Whitney Naito. I'm joining you from Thika. I study in Jomo Kenyatta University and I study corporate communication.
Thank you so much. And to the lady also in yellow.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Josephine Flora. I'm currently in Kiambu. I'm joining you from Kiambu County, Kikuyu constituency, and I'm a student at the University of Nairobi. My home county is actually in Busia. I spend most of my holidays there. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So when you're not in Nairobi, you are in Busia.
Yeah, when I'm not in Kiambu.
Oh, yes, right now you are in Kiambu. So when you're not in Kiambu, you are in Busia. Fiona, when you're not
Yes.
in Juja, where are you? Where do you
I'm in
spend your time?
Nairobi.
In
Nairobi.
Then which is your home county?
My home county,
Yes,
Homa Bay.
Homa Bay County. Okay, Homa Bay. Okay. What were Lake Victoria? Karibuni sana. This is a very great conversation we are having here. You know, just I think a month ago, yeah, at a time like this last month, we were still battling to know who is going to be, who is the president and everything, because we remember the case in the Supreme Court. But now we have a sitting president, we have his deputy, we have all the 47 governors with us, the deputies. Unfortunately, I think for Baringo, they lost the deputy governor. We have 47 senators, 47 women representatives. We have, there are about, actually not about, but we have 1,450 MCAs. We have members of parliament in 290 constituencies. All these people campaigned, came out, talked about their issues, go to the journey. We went to the ballot, elected them, and here we are ready to talk about some of the issues that I've been talking about. Who in this panel ever had an Kenyan politician talk about climate change or just climate? Anyone? Nobody? Nobody? Murife, run for your lives now. Let me ask you, maybe just in a minute or two each person, what are some of the campaign agendas for our politicians? Fiona, may I start with you?
Yeah, okay.
What are the campaign agendas for politicians that you had?
I'll just categorize them. Most of them are focusing on agriculture, the health sector, education, on initiatives on how to curb the current inflammation in our economy. Yeah, I think those are the most heard of manifestos from majority of the parties, and ways to steer the country forward economically. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Whitney, what are some of the campaign agendas you had from your local area politicians?
Okay, well, what I had, it was about giving the youth work, like
Ongeza sauti kidogo ndio wasikie vizuri.
what I had from the politicians when they were campaigning, they were talking of how they would, change the society by giving the youth work and like the roads and all.
Flora, did you hear her well?
Yes.
Okay. But Whitney, mimi ndasema ongeza sauti vizuri because hawa wanasiasa tukiongea nao lazima wasikie sauti zetu vizuri. Simon, on the same question.
I would say that most of the campaigns I had were centered upon jobs for the youth. They're creating the job market, expanding the job market in Kenya, and then using that to catapult the economic status of the country. There was also people who are touching on better integration amongst the communities, especially in the rural areas where we have boundaries between communities. They were preaching peace, and prosperity, depending on where you come from. So those are the two major ones that I noted.
Okay. Flora, in Busia, Kiambu, and Nairobi, you represent 3 counties.
Yeah, there was the issue of inflation. I mean, that was obvious. So we'd hear issues like the price of unga will go to 70 shillings. That's on the national level. Like that was spoken a lot. Then the issue on agriculture, the issue on fertilizer was almost the topic of the day. And then education from my local area leader here in Kikuyu spoke up a lot on education, touched on how much they'll increase the number, work towards increasing the number of public schools here, school buses. So yeah, those were the issues that I had mostly being talked about. And also on the economic side of it, he was like, he'll increase the number of markets. We have one market, so he'll increase the number of markets here to make it easier for the hawkers not to be on the streets.
So I like it already because when the moment you mentioned they talked about agriculture, then definitely they were talking about this topic in one way or the other. What did you hear them talk about agriculture, Fiona?
About agriculture, most of them were focusing on reducing the price for fertilizer, giving our farmers some relief on some of the products they use on their farm. But the big question is, how can you touch on agriculture without touching on climate? You can reduce the price of fertilizer for me, yes, but what if I use this fertilizer on a season that I'm not supposed to? I use it today, then tomorrow it is flooded. All this fertilizer will be wasted. off. We cannot talk about agriculture minus climate. You cannot talk about infrastructure minus climate. Where are you going to build? Do you understand the aspect of where you want to build? Do you understand the risk you're putting our money on if you do not even understand the climatic conditions of that particular level? They were touching on factors that can only flourish with climate, but they were not touching on climate. They're just touching on it from Bali. They are not bringing the real sense into life. So that is not talking about climate. That is talking on agriculture, how you want to promote agriculture, but in real sense, you just want to destroy this thing. That is a short-term solution you're giving these farmers. That is not a long-term solution. What is the need of decreasing the fertilizer price if I'll use it and tomorrow it is all flooded, all of it is washed off? That is a waste of money, even though you reduced the price for me. So that was not climate, that was purely agriculture.
I see your point is getting straight into the heart of Josephine Flora. Josephine, inakaa hii point imekuguza tofauti sana. Yeah, Josephine.
Nikisikia when they were talking about issues to do with agriculture, as just Fiona has said, mostly they were talking about reducing the cost of fertilizer. But the big question is fertilizer the only factor that's making the agricultural sector suffer? Are there no other factors that affect it? Why are they not touching on those issues? I feel like they were sugarcoating it. Should I say sugarcoating, or they were just walikuwa wanatupaka mafuta kwenye mgongo? Kwa sababu, because I'm just like, I mean, you can do better than that. And it's sad to see Kenyans excited about the cost of fertilizer going down, not really wondering why is this agricultural sector being affected. I like I said when we were talking about food security, I went to my village last year and we had not harvested maize. The whole thing had dried up. I inquired from my aunt what's happening, and she told me there were no rains. So she had fertilizer. The thing that was not there was rain. So is fertilizer really the issue? I doubt.
Simon, what do you think on the same? Because people wanted fertilizer, the prices have been reduced. Then again, why are people complaining? I think that is enough to give us the produce that we want.
No, I think that is just their way of playing on the, shall I say, the trusting nature of Kenyans. You know, they approach it from such a cynical manner, because even if you give the person fertilizer, just as Fiona has said, and then drought strikes, you know, that fertilizer is just rendered useless. You know, you just have really expensive fertilizer or really cheap fertilizer on your farm, but without the rain, without the timing of the season, it won't really help, because the crops won't grow. It's not the only factor that was inhibiting crop growth in Kenya. I'd attribute it more to the two drought seasons that we've had that were unexpected in the past 5 years. If they could have found a way to solve that, then they would have been helping the farmers, because farmers have been farming since before we had, you know, the rise in price of fertilizers, and we've been producing crops. So that was not the only issue. I agree with them completely.
Asante sana. Naito, any reaction on that?
Well, I feel like they have summed up everything that, you know, I also had in mind. Like, they only touched on the fertilizer thing, but there's more to that than fertilizer. So yes, I agree with them.
Okay, good. So if they were to talk about climate change in agriculture, Fiona, what do you think they should have mentioned? Because you are saying the issue is not just fertilizer, the issue is not just about the subsidies that they're giving us. How then was climate change supposed to get into this? Because some other people believe that, you know, I heard some politicians saying, we do not have food because of cartels. We do not have food because Kenyans did not go to their farms to prepare their farms. Is the issue Kenyans or climate or the changes that have happened?
Okay, talking of cartels, talking of Kenyans, those are secondary factors affecting the agricultural sector. The primary factor affecting the agricultural sector, I believe, is climate. Do Kenyans understand what is required for certain crops to nourish in a certain area? Do we understand how our land is supposed to be for this crop to nourish there? Do we understand that we have different types of fertilizers? that are needed for different crops. Do our farmers understand that? Most of our farmers are local farmers, and I'm pretty sure the knowledge they have is the common knowledge that we all have about farms. But we also have this detailed knowledge. We must know about certain fertilizers, about how they're supposed to be added to our farms, how they're supposed to be used, their effects. Do our farmers know how to direct the excess fertilizer that is washed up from the farms, how to direct this waste? Do they know about that? Climate is the primary change. Do our farmers understand the climatic patterns, the rain patterns? If you research from 10 years ago, farmers were able to predict the climatic factors. But at this point, climatic factors are not as predictable. Are we putting enough research into climate so that we can at least give people something about climate? We can give people something about drought, when to expect drought. Is it going to be prolonged? Is it going to come early? Because today you'll hear in the news, it is, let's say it is July and there is sun. It is not explainable. We are not used to that. We are used to associating July with the cold season. We are used to associating such months with certain weather patterns. But recently, we've seen the dynamic shift in these climatic patterns. Are our farmers understanding that? Ama, we are planting in the wrong season. You plant in the wrong season, you will not get any yield at the end of it. Our farmers need to understand that things are shifting. Weather patterns are not the same from 10 years ago. Things are changing. We are having prolonged drought. We are having early onset of drought. We are having prolonged rain seasons. We are having early onset of rainy season. The patterns have shifted, and until our farmers understand that, all these other secondary factors, when put into place, it will not help the agricultural sector if the primary factor has not been curbed, if our farmers have not been educated on these climatic patterns. Our farmers need to understand that it is not about the rain, Pia. It is not only about the rain. It is not only about trees. And it is so sad to see when we talk about climate, we want to associate it with trees. That is what we all know. That is what most Kenyans know, because that is what most politicians are targeting. But climate involves precipitation, the altitude, the latitude, a lot of things which contribute to agriculture. Farmers need to understand the primary contributor to a good agricultural produce. We are focusing on secondary factors and we are ignoring the primary factor, which is climate.
Maybe Fiona, just hold it there, Flora. Then what is the role of the politician in ensuring that the farmers know what we're talking about?
Okay, the role of politician here is partnering with the stakeholders at hand. With stakeholders, what do I mean? If you want to reach my grandmother in the village, the best person to use is the Nyumba Kumi guy. If you want to reach a person down there in our native homes, the best person to use is the chief, because they know the people there. So they need to create proper civic education, make these people understand. We have digital agriculture. They don't need to always wait upon the rain for them to start farming or for them to start to harvest or something. There are better ways of ensuring that agriculture is flourishing without necessarily them expecting on the rain will come at this particular point, the rain will come at this particular point. I was looking at research and it shows we lose 3% of our GDP due to climate change. And if I'm looking at a county like Fiona said, she comes from Homa Bay, they majorly depend on, most of people there depend on fishing. And Kenya as a country gets 2%. Homa Bay contributes through fishing, contributes 2% to our GDP. So it's like a whole county's income or source of income is lost due to climatic change. How can these people be educated for them to understand? It is not the government to make things work. It's also your initiative. You can do this at your own personal level, and you need to learn to adapt. Uhuru in 2021, our former president, was speaking about climatic adaptation. How do you know how to the measures that need to be put in place for you to adapt to the current climatic change? Of course, there's climate change. Me as a person in my village here, how can I adapt? One, there is digital I've talked about it. There's digital agriculture. There is water conservation measures. How should I call it? Conservation storage measures. Does this person know this and this is what I need to do? If you look at the people in Homa Bay, they might not know why they are experiencing low should I call low number of fish? Why they are fishing? They are not getting the expected number of fish. Their fishing output is low. They need to be told there are some activities that you as human beings are doing that are contributing to the water not being enough to sustain the lives of these fish. So you can do this and this and this to preserve the water. It's not necessarily upon the government to come and do that for you. It's the government to educate you on what is expected of you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to react on that, maybe before I move to the next segment of this conversation? Simon or Naito?
Yes,
Okay,
I
Simon?
would.
Yes.
And I'd like to say that while personal initiative is a good thing and it is recommended, you must also understand that the government is there to take away some of the social pressure that our daily life has to do with. For example, social education, as Flora has just explained, but also they must go to a personal level and find out, because essentially that is why we have ministries in the government. Their task is to improve that specific sector. So if you're tasked in the Ministry of Farming, Fishing and Agriculture, it is your sole responsibility to find out why are people's attitudes the way they are towards farming and fishing. Why are their practices either retrogressive or progressive, and what can you do to help them improve? I think that the government has a more of a major role to play as compared to the people, because cumulatively they have the larger amount of resources they can put to work towards this specific goal.
Okay, thank you. Whitney, any quick reaction on that?
Well, I feel like, okay, I had Fiona talk about farmers. It's not only about farmers. We should be accountable, like each and every single person should be accountable for what is happening. It's not about farmers that they should be educated, it's we, like all of us should be educated, from the little ones to, the grown ones. So, yeah.
So Whitney believes that it's not just about the farmers, but it's just about all of us. This is not just a role that should be left to farmers alone, but all of us as citizens of this great country called Kenya. My next question to all of you, just to remind everyone who is watching, that the conversation is around climate change and our politics. Recently, we had an election. We are trying to see if climate change ever featured in the campaign manifestos of different leaders. And here, we're not just talking about the president. That is the most unfortunate thing. Every time we talk about leaders in Kenya, all the hands first go to the president. I'm asking about even the 47 governors we have, their deputies, because on that ticket they ran as a team. I'm asking about the 47 senators. I'm asking about the women representatives, also 47. I'm talking about the 1,450 members of the county assembly of the 47 county assemblies, and of course talking about the 290 members of the National Assembly, together with all those who are nominated. Have you ever heard these people talk about climate change or about how to deal with the changes that are happening in our environment, at the levels of our water bodies? Do these things really form part of their conversation? So my next round of question will be, then in that case, I do not think that they're not aware. They're aware of what we're talking about. It's not even the first time they're hearing about this. Why then do you think these things do not form part of their campaign agendas? Because when we hear them talk around, they know all the other topics that they're discussing. Now that all of you on this panel, together, myself and those who are watching, agree that there's something happening that is urgent, how comes it is not in the mouths of our politicians? We talked about energy yesterday, and people are proposing that, you know what, we need to start thinking on how to deal with this whole pollution caused by border and old buses on the roads, and even the sources of energy in the schools. How food is cooked for students. We talked about food security on Tuesday, and there were issues of even Kenyans now thinking of better alternatives to ugali, for example, because there seems to be over reliance on ugali. And I remember Mark defending that topic. He defended it so passionately. Mark said there's no way for him, if he eats rice, Rice for him ni kama amekunywa maji tu akalala.
Ni
But then there was
ni kama kulamba glucose.
yes, ni kama kulamba glucose if you say so. But why do you think then it does not fall into the mouths of our politicians? Let me start with Whitney. How come this topic is not a topic of interest to our local leaders?
I feel like it's not a topic of interest because, okay, we don't really worry about climate change because it's overwhelming or we're already in too deep. So it's like there's no hope, rather. Like it's going to, no one feels or no one will understand how they're going to deal with it. So to avoid such, they keep it out of the talk and carry on with other agendas.
Do you think it's about them or about the citizens who listen to them? Do you think who cares the most, the politicians or the wananchi?
The politicians, I don't think politicians really care about climate change per se, but us as citizens, we do care because we're the ones who are feeling the effect. We're the ones who are suffering more, unlike them. So, yeah.
Okay, Flora, go on.
Okay, I think the problem is we have politicians and not leaders. And our politicians just have what I usually term as bad manners. They just have bad manners and they're opportunists. They'll use any slight opportunity to take advantage of a common mwananchi. And that is why was it trending? Is it last week or when? Our incoming deputy president goes ahead and tells people to go and farm in forest. I'm sure the people that were being told that were very excited. That shows just how much ignorant he is on issues climate change and the impact he's going to create by just allowing this particular group of people to go and farm in forest. I wouldn't blame him. I'd blame us as Kenyans. We need to take also our own share of blame, because that is what we wanted to hear and that's what he fed us. That's why I say they're opportunists. They'll tell you what you want to hear. I was talking to a friend of mine and I realized ever since I was born, ever since I was young, the floods in Budalangi have never ended. Why are we still talking of the same things? Why is the issue not addressed to date? Ever since we were young, on this panel you'll agree with me, we all know Turkana is known for hunger. There's never food in Turkana. Why are politicians not solving such issues? Why are they not coming with long-term solutions to such issues? It's because us as Kenyans, we've put a deaf ear on that. All we want to hear is, by this time, in my first 100 days, I will lower this, I will do this, I will do this. We don't want to hear the real issues. Why can't they tell us, this is the plan I have with the floods in Budalangi. This is the plan I have with the Turkana and all that. So I think the problem, in as much as it's our politicians, we as Kenyans also need to take our own share of the blame. We want to hear what we want to hear. We want first problems that are solved instantly. And that's what the politicians have been doing it. I will not call them leaders. They are not leaders. What we have today in Kenya are politicians. And politicians are opportunists. They will never solve the problem, because if he solves that particular problem, how will he campaign come 2027? What will he tell you he will solve when he has already solved everything? So that's why they don't solve things. I feel so sad that today we're still battling with malaria. I mean, seriously? Are we still talking of these things? So that even can tell you climate change is the least of their worries, not knowing that it's due to climate change that we are experiencing all these problems.
Simon, I hope, Flora, the way you are talking, when your time comes to be that leader, you'll be different. I hope you will be different. Simon,
try me.
Yes. Simon, Flora believes that the blame must also be taken to our side. Then she also believes that ideally these politicians are not leaders. They don't care. Someone once said that, politicians are like diapers. We have to keep on changing them if we want to be safe. I don't know how true that is, but it seems there's some level of truthfulness in it. But Simon, what do you think about the same?
I think we cannot also attribute all the blame to the politicians. I've always been of the opinion that politicians are just indicators of what goes on in a society. They're the one sect that we can use to predict how the people are perceiving things, their attitudes towards things, because just like Flora said, they're opportunists. So where they are is where most of the attention is. I think that also generally as Kenyans, and not really our problem as Kenyans, but as the world, we are unwilling to accept that the climate is changing and that it has impacts on our lives. So yes, while I will attribute some of the blame to the politician, I will also attribute most of the blame really to the citizen who elected the politician in the first place. Because just like Jocelyn said, we know they are not leaders. It is a clear, known fact. We know that these people are not there to lead us. They are there for their own agendas, to achieve their own things. So you cannot also come and then start crying again, saying, "Oh, why have you not done this?" We knew they were not going to do that when you put them there. There was never any chance or hope that they were going to do what you wanted. You knew they were after their own selfish ends. So you cannot just blame the person. You also must take responsibility on yourself.
So Simon, on the same note, then how comes with all the issues that we have, all of us recognizing that climate change is a problem, why is it not getting into the mouths of the politician? Why can't we hear about it? Is it about what Wananchi want to hear, or they're doing it tactfully?
It's about what we want to hear as citizens. Pondo, if I come and start telling you that we need to plant more trees in the Mau rainforest or in the Abadia rainforest, and another person comes and tells you the next day, I will reduce the taxes by 20%, I will increase your salary by 40%, whom are you most likely to listen to? Is it the person who's going to reduce the taxes, increase your salary, or is it the person who's going to plant trees? The focus right now is not really on climate change to most Kenyans. The issue they are trying to grapple with is the economic survival. So long as you can appeal to that, they don't really care about anything else.
I felt like I wanted to respond to your question on the one on taxes and salaries. I think that question will apply to those who have jobs. Because if you don't have any job, you're wondering which salaries are going to be increased, and even when you don't understand how taxation happens, it becomes problematic.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, okay. Fiona, on the same question.
The issue of climate, whenever it is on our politicians' mouth, they're offering a divided front. They are never on the same page. Taking DP Gachagwa's statement on encouraging people to get into forested areas and plant their maize. Does Gachagua even understand how trees help climate compared to maize? Does he even understand that fact? I don't know. Maybe he understands it, but he wants to talk about maize because we want to hear about maize. Why do we want to hear about maize? Because the prices for maize flour have increased, so we want to hear about maize. Tobiko today will say he is going to chase everyone in forested areas. Murkomen will battle back with that is what they've called home since Wakewa Dogo. Where do you want them to go to? You want to remove them from their homes. Where do you want them to go to? That is a divided front. We cannot be having one leader saying, I want to do this. I want us to increase the forested area, the forested coverage of Kenya. And we have another leader saying, I want my people to stay in forests because that is where they were born, that is home to them. I want my people to get into forests and plant because they need food. Politicians are offering a divided front. Why are people not focusing on climate? Politicians are not talking about it. Then again, why are politicians not talking about it? It is because of us, the voters. Look at it this way. If we never complained about jobs, politicians would never have touched on jobs in their campaigns. If we wouldn't have complained about the inflations going on, they would have never approached the issue of inflation. Why are they not approaching these climatic issues? We are not talking about it. We are not pressurizing them on it. Why are they talking about fertilizers? That is what farmers are talking about. So what we want to be told is what we are told. What we want to hear is what they tell us. Until the day when we will arise as a whole nation and understand that in real sense, everything is being controlled by climate and put a united front on climatic factors, our leaders will start talking about them. But so long as we continue to ignore climate as a factor in our economy, in our social setup, in everything that revolves our life, we will never hear our politicians talk about it. Anyway, while you talk about something that people are not complaining about, maybe we are comfortable with the climatic conditions. We are comfortable with being affected by floods. People in Budalangi are comfortable with floods. People in Turkana are comfortable by it. While they talk about it, they'll only talk about flooding after people have died. We'll only talk about drought after people have starved to death. But this whole time, what is climate? Climate is the weather pattern over a period of time. Over a period of time, 35 years, it is something that can be predicted. It is something you'll have a graph, you look at it, and you can predict. To me, it is not something that will get us by surprise. It is something they know this is going to happen. Turkana is going to have a drought season. What are the mitigation factors? What are the mitigation factors? What are we going to do? Budalangi is going to be flooded. During this is a rainy season. It is going to be flooded. What factors are we going to put in place to avoid the loss of life? In February, the beginning of this year, there's a bridge in Kajiado that was built worth 100 million. 100 million. This bridge collapsed 6 days later. 6 days later, that was 100 million down the drain because of floods. This is what I'm talking about. We do not understand things about climate. Climate also involves aspects. Do you understand the nature of your landscape? Where are you putting this bridge? Where are you putting this bridge? Why will you position a bridge in a place where it is highly susceptible to collapse when floods come? You use 100 million on something that cannot even stay for 1 week. In 2007, concerning the issue of Budalangi, our former president, the late Kibaki, talked about using 11 billion to construct dams in River Nzoia to curb the issue of flooding in Budalangi. And we had 3 proposed dams, Rongai, Anyiko, and Kipkaren. They were not constructed. Now look at when that bill was proposed in 2007. What year was 2007? That was an election year. This issue was talked about again in 2013. What year was 2013? It was an election year. Why are we bringing these issues up in election years? Because at this time, this is what we want to hear. If you tell us this, you are going to persuade us into voting for you, and then you are going to keep quiet about it. We had a dam constructed in Budalangi along River Nzoia, and I think it was destroyed by floods soon after. We have the landslides in West Pokot around 2020 that claimed the lives of many people. So even if political leaders talk about climate, they are not talking about it in a united front. Even as a citizen, we have failed. We only talk about climate when we feel the negative effects of this. I'm a resident in Budalangi. I know very well my area is prone to flooding. Why should I not talk about it when it is sunny? Why should I not persuade my governor, my MCA to do something during the sunny period before rains approach? Why do you want to talk about climate after we've died, after we've starved to death?
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I think if we were in a physical location, I would just say that let's clap for Fiona, but I think we can still do it. Tumpatika kitu kidogo tu. Maybe tumsnapie kidogo, yeah? Because I like what she has mentioned, that the politician, we have the power to push them to talk about the thing that we want them to talk about. So the high cost of living, right now they're talking about it because people have been going to the streets to talk about it. There was an issue sometimes back of teenage pregnancy, and all of a sudden, every politician started talking about it. The issue of mental health is slowly getting its way to the parliament. If you've had people are now beginning to talk about it. Now, Fiona is suggesting and also maybe recommending that if we want these people to talk about climate change, as citizens, we have to show them that this thing is an emergency. Naito, do you agree to this?
Well, yeah, I feel like we should. we should definitely push them like through activism and all. But at the same time, I feel like we are also sometimes skeptical about the government in general. And if we happen to be skeptical about what they're telling us, and for example, the deputy president Gashago saying that we should plant maize or forest. Maybe okay, there is a way he had pictured it that we haven't seen it. Maybe we're skeptical about, like, we don't want to be open to such ideas. And if we are skeptical about what they're telling us, if they tell us to do something about climate change, we're just tied up. We're not ready to accept. So everyone is just criticizing him, like tuende tukapande mahindi kwa forest. And I feel like we should be more open to new ideas. Probably he had picture of rather than what we're thinking of. Yeah.
Okay. Flora, you're smiling.
Well, okay. Should I respond to that?
Kindly do. That's why we are here for this great debate.
Okay, it will be so funny if we say, okay, I understand where Naito is coming from. Probably we should
And maybe just to
accept it.
sorry for the interruption, just to let people know what we're talking about here, for example, is what we call the Shamba system. And I'm very keen how to mention this word because I know where I come from. This shness, how to be very easy. It is the Shamba system. Yes, I got it right, not the Samba system. Okay, Flora, go.
Okay, I understand. Probably he's coming, maybe he has some goodwill, but I'm just like, why should we cut down trees as if there's no land to plant maize? Let trees be where they are supposed to be. I don't see the need of cutting down trees. One, I think that the issue here should be, why are these people living in the forest? What happened? Why are we still having people owning huge vast of land that they're not using while we have people that are living in places they're not supposed to live? Why not get a place where these people can go live and let the forest serve its purpose? There's a reason why we need that forest. And people can still farm maize in whichever place they'll be put to stay. I think that's what he should be addressing, not telling people you can cut down trees and build and mini maize there. People have maize. I'm looking at an example in my home village. There is of course enough shamba to farm, but there's still no maize. Why is that so? Why is he not addressing that? Even if you tell people to farm maize in that forest, what is the guarantee that they'll get an output out of it? What is the guarantee that there'll be something different from that person in Busia who's been farming and there's nothing coming out of it? I think he's running away from the fact that these people are living in the forest and they're not supposed to live in the forest. So he's telling them anything just to satisfy them, anything to make them stop talking about the real issues. I think that is what we should be looking at as Kenyans. Because, compare maize and trees. Which one serves the huge purpose here when it comes to issues climate change? Did he look at that factor? Did he consider that? How can that be tackled? How do you tell someone we are here preaching for people to cut one tree and plant two? And in fact, we are at a point where we are advocating for trees not to be cut. And then you're telling people to cut down trees and plant maize. Is it logic? No, it's not. The issue here is if you want maize, try and support those people that are already planting maize and see how best they can be helped. And these people that are living in the forest, can there be found a place for them to settle in? I think, Opondo, that's how I believe that's a better way of solving whatever issue it was, rather than covering it up or sugarcoating it with, you can cut down trees and plant whatever you want to plant. That is so wrong. That is not logical.
Thank you.
Um,
Let me also, okay, Fifi, before you go on, just also to let everyone who is watching know that the conversation is around climate change and politics. The discussion is brought to you here by CAMD Voices, close partnership with Hans Sadel Foundation and Regional Sustainability Network. This conversation began on Monday, and we are all doing this in preparation for COP27 happening in Africa. It is happening on our soil, and some of these politicians we are talking about will attend COP in Egypt. They are going to talk about this same issue that we are addressing here. Remember COP26 that happened in Europe last year. Now let me say in Europe, because they also said COP is happening in Africa. COP26, among the goals, there was mitigation. I hear you talking about mitigation. There are the issues of need for more collaboration. There was the issue of adaptation. And of course, the issue of finance, money, climate money, where all this is, came out so strongly. Here we are already talking about this great conversation. You can follow this conversation on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Hashtag is Changamkia Climate. The debates are the Youth for Climate debates. We've decided to take this conversation to the young people whose future we are talking about. If you're talking about the people that we are building the SGR for, we are talking about mass transport, for example, when you're talking about BRT. I'm just coming to that. Those who use Thika Road and other major roads, you know, the government has been for a long time trying to introduce the bus rapid transport. How climate friendly are these? We are talking about the energy. There's always been a talk on how to ease the traffic or the congestion caused by matatus, border borders. We are talking about the energy that we use at our homes. Kenya experiences the sunshine actually from January to December. How is it that our politicians are not talking about better green energy? How then we can together lead in the transition to green energy? That is the conversation that we are having here today. When you talk about politics, actually, it is like a summary because everything revolves around politicians. If the policies they make affect us directly, the debates they have in that parliament, the political utterances they give in public, we know these things affect us directly. Fiona, you wanted to respond to something before I go to the next question?
Yeah, I wanted to respond about us not being open to Gachagwa's proposal, why it has met a lot of criticism. This is because when you cut down trees to plant maize, there's nothing you've done to climate. You've only destroyed climate. Why? Do we understand the importance of trees in climate? Do we even understand the importance of trees to the soil itself? How trees hold soil particles together, the strength of this soil, so that we avoid the issues of soil being swept away when we have heavy floods. That is the role of trees. And I'm pretty sure maize cannot do that. Maize do not have strong roots to ensure that soil particles are deeply compacted together. Trees, again, they capture moisture, which will, I think most of us who have done geography, we understand the cycle from how precipitation, convention, infiltration, filtration works. And trees help in this. If water filters through the soil and we have trees that are holding these soil particles together, the water retention in this soil will be greater compared to water retention that will be there in an area that has maize compared to in an area that has trees. So if you want agriculture to flourish, we need to have trees because trees are protecting our soils, the same soils that you want to plant this maize on. We will need rain. Where will we get this rain? If the leaves of the trees capture moisture, this moisture will evaporate with time and it will condense and it will come back as rain. This same rain will water the same plants Gachagua wants us to plant in this area. So the issue of maize being brought by Gachagua is just to please us because we are suffering from the inflation of maize. But we are not looking at the big picture. Eventually, we will cut down trees, we will grow maize, and our soil will grow weak and weaker and weaker. And this maize will no longer grow because where is the soil? The soil has been swept away from time to time because there are no trees to hold the soil particles together. So we cannot be open to such ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Can you respond something upon that?
Okay, Simon, you can go on. In fact, even if Simon, before you go, there's someone, and najua mnaumwa sana mko na machungu, but there's a gentleman here called Gaziva Brain. Am I the only one who supports agroforestry? But the problem with Kenyans is that they will in turn grab the forest areas and turn them into settlements instead of the intended purpose. This is Kenya. So I see where Naito comes in. I see where His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua comes in. And Agaziva, I really, really understand what you're saying, because the proposal is that we do agroforestry. But now, Agaziva thinks that Kenyans eventually will settle down in these forests, and what will happen later? They'll start grabbing the land and everything will happen. So then Omukoko then brings in the question that how then, because maybe sometimes, maybe when some things are mentioned, we politicize it a lot, saying that the panel is looking sharp. I want them to tell me, how do we depoliticize issues of national concern, such as climate change? Fiona, remember you talked about we are approaching all issues divided fronts. How then do we ensure that we are depoliticizing that some issues of national concern? So, for example, when we talk about issues, teenage pregnancy being a crisis, issues of high cost of living, issues of maybe floods and crime, how do we depoliticize such issues? That's now the question that also bringing the aspect of climate change. It is happening. It is affecting us. How then do we approach it? How do we depoliticize this? Simon, would you like to address this, or maybe even after you are done with your comment?
Yes, I wanted to comment on something, and it's on the deputy president's statement. I do not think that it is as black and white as go and farm in the forest. I think that there has been a lot of pressure on these people. I think, and the issue started way back when in 2007, when a lot of people are displaced from their homes and they sought refuge in our various forests. So I think that trying to settle such an issue requires a bit more finesse than simply either asking these people to leave, or just dislocating them, en masse. So I think that it's also complicated, just as politics tends to be, because it's not as black and white. You cannot really understand how they survived there. And even when they're given the freedom to farm in this forest, you cannot really either sort of predict the level of damage they're going to do to the forest, or even try and help them mitigate it, because you have to remember one thing: these people have either been oppressed or they have been suffering for quite some time. And that's why the deputy president's statement is making sense to them, because that is a point of feeling for them. They feel like they are withdrawn, they are taken apart from their nation, from their homes, from their livelihoods. And especially if you look at the people who are choosing to settle in those forests, they are primarily dependent on agriculture as a means of economic independence. So trying to convince them that the life of a tree, or that a tree growing, is more important than their maize is going to be a bit more difficult than you think, because you will present to them statistics, numbers, predictions. They'll tell you that's all and good, but what will I eat tomorrow? Will I eat your statistics? Will I eat your numbers? Or will I eat the maize that I'm trying to plant? So address the key issue. If the key issue is homes, build homes. If the key issue is farms, find farms. But you cannot just ask someone to live, live like you're harming the environment, the climate. You need to go. That's going to be a bit unfair and close to impossible to do. Thank you.
Okay,
Well,
wonderful. Okay.
I'd like to say something. Later
Yes.
on, Gashagwe, he clarified what he was saying. Apparently, he didn't mean we cut down trees. He said they were going to release a plan where we cultivate in forests without destroying trees. Like we plant maize in vacant lands and then trees grow. And when it comes to depoliticizing climate change, yeah, we can reframe climate change around topics that interest like both parties, the government and us, into job creation, economic development. Instead of using the term climate change, we can reframe it as also economic development, sustainability. And yeah, when we reframe it like that, we focus on the impact of climate change solutions on the human society rather than government.
Thank you. So let's run away from Gachagua and this Shamba system. We'll come back to it later. Please. Faith Nyabera says it is disheartening at the level at which most people are ignorant about climate change. As much as the government plays a role in climate change, we too, as ordinary citizens, are responsible for this. Thank you. Gaziva, if possible, I think I can send you a link because it seems you have something nice you'd like to share with us. If possible, let me know if you'd like to join the panel, maybe just to ask them a question, because we have at least a slot or two. You can just join and ask or contribute to this discussion. Even Omukoko, if you are feeling like Elena Ondeng, if you are feeling like you also want to join this conversation, karibuni sana. Martin Maina, who is Habibi on this panel? I think kuna salamu zinatumwa hapa. Okay, Lina also ni kama amepitisha salamu hapa. Adonai anawasalimia. Mark Omak anasema niko area kama bacteria. Kosgei amesalimia Naitu. Wakenya na salamu. Wakenya mnapenda salamu. But anyway, we are here. So there's sometimes back there was an issue of a certain honorable member of the National Assembly. You remember the time they talk about Mau Forest? Then one member of parliament went and addressing the rally, and I'm saying this because in the public domain, he asked wananchi, misitu ndio inaleta mvua ama mvua inaletwa na Mungu? And everyone was there answering, mvua inatoka mbinguni na inaletwa na Mungu. And that is the time that I knew we must have this conversation with our politicians and about them and how the communication is done. But anyway, here we are, you people. Now that we have the leaders that we are talking about, what are some of the plans you'd like to see your leaders put in place at the county level, at the village levels, to ensure that we are preparing for this green revolution, the transition that we're talking about? What are some of the things that you'd like to see them putting in place to help farmers, to help those maybe even to help in our energy, to help even in, I mean, the little things that we are using at home that are generally just affecting our climate in general? Fiona?
I think I like what Whitney has said on climate change. Seems like a gigantic word. I like the way she has put it. Like, let us use other terms to approach the situation. People are, most of the time we are attracted to these power words like hustler nation. We will be attracted to that. We'll be attracted to a slogan. Let these political leaders bring a slogan that is related to climate change. At the simple level, we need to understand that pollution is also part. Pollution also affects climate. A lot of things affect climate. Let people understand issues on public transport, waste disposal, and everything. Let us talk to our industries. Let us direct them on how to dispose this waste. Let's not just tell them, because the laws are there. They know the proper disposal methods, but they are not being followed. Why are they not being followed by the various parties involved? They are not being followed because there is no one there to follow through. If are you really disposing waste the way you want you to dispose waste? If we can be hapa with these industries on where are you disposing your waste. I think there's an industry in Mukurwanjenga. I'm not sure. I think it is in Mukurwanjenga, where they were complaining of noise pollution, them releasing the chemical into the settlement areas. You see, this release of these chemicals in the settlement area, it will in turn affect climate. Can we have leaders stepping in, talking to members or talking to the shareholders of these industries? This is how you are supposed to dispose your waste. Let us hold people accountable. Let us turn to rivers. Our rivers are very polluted. Let us talk to wananchi. Let us have days where we can clean our rivers. Let us take tree planting days seriously. Let us buy seedlings. Let MCAs give these seedlings to their constituents. Let us plant seedlings. Let us have days where we say, where we talk about how a lot of vehicles on the road affect the climate because that emission of the dangerous waste from this. Let us encourage people to use public transport at times. There's no need of having too many private vehicles on the road when we can have a very well organized public transport system that will accommodate people, that will not harass people. Let us reform our transport sector so that we can encourage people to use this public transport system to curb the amount of pollutants we are releasing to the environment. Let us bring it to the people. Let people understand. Let a farmer understand that I'm supposed to do this with my farm wastes. I'm supposed to do that. I'm not supposed to just release them into the local river that is passing through my farm. Let us understand how to manage our wastes. Let us understand how to manage different pollutants as citizens, and let politicians be there. Let us have people who can hold us accountable. Let us have people who can keep us on our toes so that we can do what is supposed to be done.
And with that, let us also read the comment from those who are watching. Reggie's Kitchen says, we can never run away from the fact that climate change is the toughest, most intractable political issue. Actually, I think she suggests that instead of talking about climate change, let's talk about simple terms like talk of food insecurity, other things like food insecurity, water issues, and so much more. So actually, I like the idea that all of you are bringing, that if you want to take this communication to the lowest level of our communities, the politicians or maybe the leaders around now should start thinking of ways. Let's run away from the term climate change. Sindio? Let's start talking about mbona siku hizi mnaona maji imepungua, siku hizi jua imekuwa mingi, si ati jua ni ya mvua. Unajua jana hizo story za Meja anasema karibu Kanairo penye watu naangalia hivi, atakuangalia hivi aseme nani yako hivi. So let's start talking about the real issues. When you start talking about, kwa mfano, as simple as mbona siku hizi bei ya nyanya imefika vile iko hivi, now that is to wale wamama wanauza pale mtaani ama nini, bei ya nyanya siku hizi iko hivi. But do you remember the days sukuma ilikuwa inafungwa 3 na ni 5 bob, ama mimi niliishi 1970s.
We were there.
Okay, ndio basi sukuma wiki ikiwa hivyo kweli, ndio nijue naongea pia na watu tunaelewana.
Well, I have never experienced such.
Okay, I'm sorry. Flora, mnafanya nakaa fossil.
Oh, sorry, ya sukuma wiki?
Yes, yani just the days when ungesikia hata nyanya 5.
Can you hear me?
Ni shilingi 5.
No, mi nimeishi kwa siku zenye nyanya 3 ni 5 bob.
Tu umekula chumvi. Simon ulipata, but the Simon gorogoro moja mahindi. Unajua, maybe now when we talk about this pia itaeleweka rahisi. Ushanunua gorogoro ya mahindi kweli ama watu wa USA ni makul kid. Okay, but acha tutulize. Ushanunua gorogoro ya mahindi?
Of course I've bought. Of course,
Okay.
nimenunua here and there.
But then you are aware that I think from end of this or end of this, bei ya unga itafika again 300 shillings. 2 kg packet inaenda kushoot to 300 shillings. That is how serious it is now when we're talking about these issues. So anyway, here we are. The question that got tumeuliza ni how do we make, how can our leaders under CC prepare our communities for the green revolution in terms of tunaongelea energy, the food we eat at home, how we move around na kila kitu. Flora?
Okay. One thing naweza sema ni about issue yenye Fiona has mentioned it, about just making these people that are working in these industries understand that emitting these waste products just anyhowly has vast and rampant effect on the environment. From an economist side of things, I'd say probably the government can use that to their advantage and impose laws on such things. Like we can have increase of imports tariffs on projects or industries that are on these industries that work in that emit these things. If the tax is increased, the reason why today most people are complaining about unga is because they can't afford it. So most people probably don't eat ugali. So if tax is increased or tariffs are increased on such things, it will force most people to cut down on their costs, and it will make us at least have an environment where there's no noise pollution and all that. Because most of the time, sisi ni wa Kenya, we know ourselves. Fiona, you'll say about reducing noise and probably arrest a few of them, but that's just it. They won't care. They'll still come other companies and they'll continue making noise over and over again. How many, you want to tell me the people that are emitting waste products in, let's say, water bodies that are used for fishing do not know it's wrong? They know it's wrong, but they still do it. What if we come up with laws that can curb such things? I think our government can try work on that. Then lower tax on agricultural produce to at least help as they had put it in the fertilizer issue, to help the farmers in the agricultural sector, and then partner with the local leaders at the lower level. I'd still talk of the nyumba ya kumi initiative, still talk of our chiefs. We can use them to help us conduct civic education to our farmers and make them understand you don't need to wait for the rain for you to go and plant. You can still plant, rain or no rain. How can you do this? Then they can have a training on how you need to, and how you can plant without rain. There is irrigation that you can conduct, and at the end of it all, you'll still have your produce without rain. Make them understand that depending on which area you are in, maize does well in this region, sukuma wiki does well in this region. Maybe they've just been planting the wrong things. So if the farmers understand, oh, this does well in my place, and it can actually do well if I adapt other means other than just the natural way of waiting for rain to come for me to plant. So I think that can go a long way. At least the farmers will be able to understand that we can do this without necessarily waiting upon rain or something.
Thank you.
Okay, you're pointing imeenda wapi?
Point
I've talked
imepotea
about
huko.
trainings. Yeah, and also cleaning and the issue of drainage. No, nimekumbuka the issue to do with drainage. Most of us that live in especially towns, we take drainage systems for granted. Probably our government, if the government and the county government and the national government can look into such things, drainage systems, they are very critical. It creates a conducive environment, especially when it rains, and also for the people, for the waste products to find a path to pass through without necessarily spilling to the public. I studied in a school where the drainage system was bad. So the whole time you can't even concentrate because waste product is all over your school. And now you can't even breathe properly. Can they work into such things? And they've been talking about this thing for a long time, especially with the national government. I've heard about the Kumerer and Aror Dam. Can they work on such projects to help us with the storage of water issue? Because I think now, as President Uhuru had put it, we need to learn to adapt with climate change. And as much as we are adapting, we need to also come up with solutions. So what can we come up with? Substantive water storage facilities to help us as Kenyans. So can such projects be going to help us? Can people be educated too on the importance of even constructing dams in our own homes? Can they come up with such things in places like Turkana to help those people with water? We cannot be still speaking about the same thing in the 21st century, that people are dying of drought. I think we need to prepare in advance for this thing, and as we are preparing, we also look for ways and means to conserve our environment.
Okay. So Simon, before
Yes.
before you come, Pole, let me go through some comments here, because there are some comments zimeletwa and I was bringing them to the screen. Then I realized now people are writing paragraphs. The conversation on YouTube iko hot sana. Nimezileta kwa screen, and every time I bring them, I noticed they were covering half of Flora's face. So let me start with Alex. Alex on Facebook, he says, I think it is such a good time on the current government, mostly our DP anaitwa Rigiji, Rigathi Gachagua, is open for conversation and very welcoming to the youth. We can be able to use the social media platforms to try and reach him and other leaders who sit at the table where decisions are made. You know something about the Kenya Kwanza government? They promised us that freedom is here. Unakumbuka? When the other people were saying freedom is coming, wao wakasema freedom is here, and they've said it is time now conversation. We are open for conversations. Let's try to see how we can engage these leaders with his wonderful, amazing dance style. We saw it in Kisumu, the way he dances. That is quite interesting. Martin Miner, honestly, we as Kenyans love to complain when there is drought. We complain when there are floods. We complain, but we can't see that we are the ones killing ourselves. I may bring back to us. When there's droughts, we complain, but yet we are contributing to that. When there are floods, we complain. It is time to note that we are the ones killing ourselves. Reggie's kitchen. Reggie needs to tell us what she's cooking in that kitchen. It is our mandate to emancipate, hey, Kizungu, emancipate the society, the need for proper disposals, need for planting trees, and most of all, know that taking care of the environment and its attachments starts with us. Agaziva, what is Agaziva coming back to share? To the panelists, is it too late to stop global warming or climate change? I'm just asking for a friend. I know you are the friend, Agaziva. Acha ukora mingi, I know. You are the friend that you are asking for yourself. Martin Miner, plus the government doesn't care about climate because most of the people in those positions will not know our struggles. So it is up to us to change. He comes back to say that is Mato still. We keep saying the government this, the government that, but what are you as an individual doing with the current situation plus the climate will never be the same as it keeps changing. So the best we can do is to adapt. Wonderful. Simon,
Yes.
your comment before I go to the next question?
Yes, I was going to say something, and I believe we actually discussed this with you once upon a time at length, and we talked about the ability of that MCA seat in community mobilization for change. And I think whenever you study strategies for community development, you always go back to the lowest level of governance because those are the people who are most in touch with the highest number of people at the highest frequency. So I think that if we utilize that seat correctly, and I think we are giving an example and we are saying that if you can just convince 10 people to assist you in a job, then automatically you have 11 hands working on the same project. If you can convince 100, you have 101, 1,000, 1,001, 10,000, 10,001. As you go on climbing, the number increases and so does their output. I think that climate change as a whole, or rather, even if we want to break it down into lesser factions, cannot be handled just like that. I think it's going to take time and commitment by everyone. Because if I'm clearing up the drainage na wewe unapita hapo unarusha vitu za miwa hapo, you see, we are going to go back to the same issue, which is the drainage being clogged. So I think it's also time that our leaders accepted their responsibility, even though they are not leaders in the real sense. They must accept part of the responsibility and they must wake up and they must talk to their people because these people elected you because they know you. Whatever means you used to get that seat is your business, but you are elected because you are widely known. That means that you can mobilize the most amount of people in that community to bring change. So you must also hold them accountable in that regard, that they can, bring us together with one mind and one purpose to save our community and our environment.
Thank you. There are some comments. The moment I bring them to the screen, Alex is writing long paragraphs. I think people really like this topic on climate change and politics. But then there's also a question here. What is the relationship between infrastructure and climate change? Maybe anyone would like to take it? Fifi or maybe Flora or Simon, as you think about it, let me read these other comments. We don't want to leave anyone behind because today is our fourth day and probably the last day we're having this conversation, of course, for the Changamkia climate virtual debates here. Ashok says, from the panel, okay, Opondo, you seem to be a very strong advocate of the two-third gender rule. Do you think we should also bring on board the conversation on gender rule when it comes to policy on climate change? Okay, I think this is a very good question to ask now, especially concerning the conversation we had here on Monday, that in fact, the research says that women and children are the biggest victims of climate change because women, generally the ones running their subsistence crop, small shambas and small gardens at the countryside, when food is needed at the house, a man most of them will give money hata ajue hata chakula inatokanga wapi. So I think definitely the issues of gender and climate change, these are conversations that we must have. Alex Oburu, are you ready for this comment? Flora umefunikwa. When it comes to the nation's overall supply of food and energy, the government is playing a crucial role. For instance, we import food worth billions of dollars because we lack the appropriate legal framework to control our agricultural sector. If we are importing food worth millions of dollars and we can simultaneously improve our agricultural region, then more of the money that is going outside will stay in the nation, which will lead to greater economic growth. Solutions are now coming. Before I go to the last round of the question, anyone would like to, Fifi, would you like to give it a try to the question on Yes, on the question of the relationship between infrastructure and climate change.
On the issue of infrastructure and climate change, I think they are related. You need to understand climate for you to bring up a building. If I want to, let me just point out some of the factors that influence climate. We have latitude, we have altitude, we have aspect, we have ocean currents, we have ITCZ. Now, when I want to talk about infrastructure, let me focus on the aspect of the land. From the aspect of the land is, do you understand the nature of your land? If I want to construct a building, a tall building, I will opt for a land that is flat, right? Compared to a land that is somehow slanted. Why will I go for a flat land and not this slanted land? During heavy rains, this slanted land, soil might come from the high areas. Nazita, they will deposit around this building. And continual deposition of soil particles, all the gravel around this building with time will weaken the foundation of this building. This building may also be prone to landslides. You cannot just build there. You cannot build a bridge on a land on a weak land. We have weak lands that cannot support strong buildings. They are weak. That is why you need to understand climate. How will the weak nature of this land be seen? During rainy season, you will notice the soil in this area will easily be tampered with because of the heavy rains compared to the soil in that area. Why would I build something in this place where the soil is so weak to even support? The soil is so weak that I just have to dig too deep for me to have the foundation of whatever
And
it is I want to.
yes, Fiona, also as maybe you also talk about that, there's also another question on also the road network, for example. You ever heard of cases where roads are swept? Cases of bridges are swept. In fact, there's a time, I think there's a 35-kilometer road that was swept somewhere in Machakos, and the road was the people built the road. The governor then said it was the road, the fastest ever built road in Kenya. But after just some few months, it was swept. So maybe I'll be coming back to Simon or to Flora, the relationship between climate change and the kind of roads that we do. Do you think it's also time to start considering what kind of infrastructure we are putting in place, knowing very well how our areas look? The other, let me see, Alex, Jeremy Atambo, is it a question or a comment? Let me see. We have talked about policies. What policies would politicians put in place to ensure that the promises of employment that come with the transition to renewable energy for Africans continue to grow? Hata tusisumbuane ati Africans, tuongele tu wa Kenya, sisi tu hapa hivi nyumbani. What are some of the policies that you think our politicians need to put in place? Or maybe, let me just ask this one very directly. You know, our MCs also have an opportunity to debate about policies in their own county assemblies. I don't know whether you've ever had, do your counties debate? Have you ever watched your own county debate? Maybe Naito. Have you ever seen county MCs in a very hot debate talking about agriculture or talking about water? Have you ever had such?
No, I have never heard of such.
Wewe uko kaunti gani? Wacha wewe. Kaunti gani hiyo?
So I'm in
Okay.
Kiambu County.
Okay, Kiambu County. Flora mtu wa Busia, Kiambu na Nairobi?
I have never unless
Never.
my MP nimewahi sikia, lakini sijawahi sikia MCA.
Okay. Simon?
No, I have not heard of any county debates, maybe.
Okay. Fiona, county assemblies?
A debate on water.
A debate on water, on plastic, on rivers, on even on solar.
Maybe I'll say water, yes, but it is only brought up when we are complaining about lack of water. But if we don't complain, it is not there. It is only addressed when we bring it up.
There's a day I was challenging, I think I was in, was it not Sia County, but that should be Migori County. And I was having a conversation with some leaders, and I was saying, how comes we're not talking about how to turn this solar energy into something so that our people can start maybe getting cheaper and cleaner energy? Then somebody said, jua imepeanwa na Mungu bure, mbona tena we debate about it? Then today, I was shocked. You've seen that there was a debate that done in UK, actually in European Union, now forcing Apple as a company to adapt to Type-C chargers for their phones because it is very important. They are inconveniencing their customers. If such debates can be done, why are we not talking about debates of plastic in our county assemblies? Debates on trees, debates on... It is crazy. Agaziva here says, what? Let me bring the comment to the screen. Kindly let's watch Plastic China, the movie. You will realize that we are the solutions of the problems we created. I love Simon's comments. Hey, at least Simon umepata one fan. Umeng'ang'ana kwa hii panel proper. But anyway, my last question as we come to the end of this conversation, unless someone wants to react to something before I throw in my last question. Simon?
Well, I don't necessarily have a reaction, just a comment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in general, we have
Mm-hmm.
to... Climate is such a vast topic that we don't just have one singular resource that we have to, energize so that we can use. We have to use anything and everything that we can. So starting from the farmers, encouraging them on using more environmental friendly fertilizers, coming to the factories, educating them on how to properly dispose of their wastes, coming to the county assembly, introducing some of these debates amongst the MCAs, the MPs, maybe even the governors and the major policy makers. I'm talking about the lawyers, the environmental law firms in the country, and even at the top seat of the country, the president and his deputy. I think we can do so much more in such a little time to set up a foundation towards recovery. If only we use everything we have at our disposal. But just like Fiona said, if we are divided, then I'm afraid we are not going to accomplish much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful.
And just a comment on infrastructure and what do we call it? And and climate change. Like if we look at the rural areas and the urban areas, there's a very huge difference when it comes to how emissions are needed. Like the urban sets areas are more advanced in terms of infrastructure compared to the rural areas. That's why if today I live here and go to my village, I'll be like, hey, the air here is nice, it's fresh. But then when I go to Nairobi, you're like, hey, hewa ya huku is choking. It's not as clean as the one in the rural areas. So I'd say more CO2 is produced in the urban areas than in the rural areas. And this is due to the fact that more infrastructure, more industries are in the rural areas compared to the urban areas. Are in the urban areas, sorry, compared to the rural areas. So urban areas, for me, if you ask me, contribute a lot when it comes to climatic change because of the industrialization that is in the urban areas compared to the rural areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sawa. Yes.
Let me comment on that for a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about infrastructure.
Okay, Simon,
Yeah.
kidogo. Whitney, you wanted to say something? I am a big fan of the gender rule. Unasikia hata nimeambiwa hapa hivi, so I have to make sure that we
Usidanganye
raise a balance
wananchi wa
well in this
Bondo.
panel.
Usidanganye
Najua today you don't
Usidanganye
just one
wananchi by
out
the
of
way.
the four. Don't worry, Simon. Simon nimekupoteza
Usidanganye
internet.
wananchi.
No,
So-
andika tu your point chini, don't worry. Whitney, I want you to go first. Then there's a gentleman here who has been commenting. Imebidi amenitafutia hadi Facebook na yapi, finally nimemleta kwa screen. Agaziva mute. You'll be asking your question shortly. Whitney?
So there's someone who asked about, is it too late to stop? Was it climate change or?
Yes.
Yeah, and what I'd say, it's no matter what you do now, it's too late to avoid it. Like all we have to do is to adapt to, to it to some extent, but we still have like plenty of space to reduce the impacts that can happen.
Thank you. Agaziva, you've joined us here also as someone you've really been chatting on YouTube, and finally you are here with us, Agaziva. Maybe just your contribution before we let you go, Agaziva.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Uh, yeah, this conversation, actually, I've been following it.
Maybe introduce
And
yourself and let us know where you're joining us from.
okay, sorry. So my name is Agaziva. I'm from Kibra. I'm a scout. And this climate change thing, we've been doing it even in the scouting program. Recently, we came up with a project called Plastic Tide Turners, just to see how we can control the use of single-use plastics. Because if you notice, there are plastics are one of the major contributors into the climate or global warming. If you've been following my chats on YouTube very well, I mentioned of a movie called Plastic China. I think it's a movie I can recommend to any person that wants to be talking or be engaging in climate change, because it simply teaches that since we are the creators of the problems we are facing currently, then that means we are the solutions ourselves. Let us not focus on the government. Let us not focus on the institutions or anything. We, the citizens ourselves, we are the ones who are contributing to global warming or the climate change by maybe using these single plastics. Like for example, why do you allow yourself to buy a plastic bottle of water, whereas you can buy the refillable one, and you can be refilling each and every now and then? Why do you allow yourself to be using a straw to take a soda, whereas uh, uh, you can either use a glass or something else? Because you see, after using the straw, the next thing will mean that utaitupa. Na kuitupa, are you not the contributor to global warming? Are you not the contributor to the climate change? So we are the causes of these problems you're facing now. Then that simply means we can also be the ones coming up with the solutions.
Okay.
Yes.
Asante sana Gaziva, and by the way, this is so kind of you. You've really been arguing with other people on YouTube. I see a lot of conversation going on YouTube, Facebook, and even on Twitter. Very hot conversation there. So let me bring a comment here from another gentleman. Yeye nikileta comment yake inabidi nyinyi wote ni wakate by half. Anasema one of the many things that make me uncomfortable is that there isn't much we can achieve without government involvement in almost everything. Forgive me for being honest, but during the previous government, there was a lot of corruption. This had an impact on agricultural subsidies, which led to increased prices for food commodities. It is clear that if we take the necessary baby steps, we can convince our government to act responsibly in the battle against climate change. Only then we will. Okay, thank you so much, Alex, for that. Back to my wonderful panelist. Agaziva, asante sana. Now maybe we can let you go in case kama so that tusikudetain hapa hivi sana. Thank you everyone who is joining this conversation, sharing the opinions, asking questions. If you are still following the conversation, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. The hashtag is Changamkia Climate. Remember, the conversation is brought to you by CampD Voices here, in partnership with the Regional Sustainability Network and Hans Seidel Foundation. We've been here since Monday, day one. Get the conversation there on climate change communication. Just type that and you'll get the conversation that we had on Monday, the 3rd day of October, the 4th day of October, which was Tuesday, our 2nd day of debating. We talked about climate change and food security. Climate change and food security, very important to us. 3rd day, yesterday, we talked about climate change and energy. Today, we're here talking about climate change and our politics. You know how we do it, and definitely we have to be involved in this conversation. On the panel, we have Fiona representing JQuat, Whitney representing JQuat, Simon from from USIU. Right now they're on their fall semester. I have to say that USIU have some very strange terminologies. Then Josephine Flora from, they say, the only university, which is not true, but the University of Nairobi. Thank you so much, people, for joining. Now I have my last question for you before we come to the end of this conversation. But before that, Martin Miner and Asema, for example, if you are talking about plastics and the government addressed that issue, but they are literally being sold everywhere. Another example is plastic bags. They were banned, but they are still being sold. But that is the most interesting thing. The plastic bags zilibaniwa. Lakini mimi every day kila siku, I mean literally almost every day bado napatana nazo, but reduce. But that is not now a reason kusema that that is enough action. We still need to do so much so that there are certain things we can just avoid once and for all. Now my last question to all of us, just checking on my time. Okay, fine. Do you think the government is listening to us and is willing to take action on the things that we're talking about, especially on matters climate change? Do you trust our government? Do you trust our politicians? Do you trust our leaders? Do you trust being in their hands right now that we're talking about matters climate change?
No.
No, Simon, Fiona?
I trust they can act.
They can act, Flora?
I never trust the government.
Okay, fine. Naito?
Well, since they are new, I do, but after they have stayed for a while,
You will not. So says in our trust, but Okshaka, trust. That's a very common. Okay, so here's the question that we are bringing this conversation to the end with. Now that there's a problem, whether we trust our government or not, we want these voices to be heard. In just a minute, Fiona, a minute for Simon, a minute for Naito, and a minute for Flora, what must we do for these voices to be heard? We want the government to take action. We want to see these actions at the community level, because someone is saying too much talking is not helping. It is now time for action. What must we do for these voices to be heard and action taken? Fiona, your 1 minute begins now.
Let us use social media effectively. Let us talk about climate change. Let us have campaigns on climate change. Let us have activists coming out and talking about climate change. Let us use all the resources we have that we can use to reach the government and talk about climate change. And also let us shift from the fact that the government doesn't care. The government has to care, and we are the only people who can make them care. Let us believe that the government has to care, and the only way for them to care is if we speak out. Let us speak out. Let us use every platform. Let us come up with slogans concerning climate change. And in this way, we can work with the government and we can bring a change.
Asante sana. Thank you for utilizing your 1 minute very well. Simon?
I will say that it will fall on us ultimately as the citizens of the country to effect these changes. Even if it's on our own, we still have to, because it is a progressive problem, and if we do not handle it, it's going to get worse.
So what must we do as young people? Yes, that's the question.
Yes, I was coming to that. As young people, especially as people who are either fresh from campus or in campus, we have the chance of a lifetime to effect change by building the masses. There are 500,000 campus students in Kenya, Opondo. If we can even get half of these people to speak up on just this one topic, then I believe that the government will have to hear us out, because we are the incoming leaders, we are the incoming professionals, we are the incoming governors, politicians, we are the incoming everything. We'll soon be taking over this country. Our voices must be heard only if we can unite them properly.
Asante sana Naito. Then I'll come to Flora.
I think as the youths, we should try, what do you call them? Environmental protests. Yeah, like we should use environmental protests, go green activities, planting trees and joining non-governmental or school programs to help us combat climate change. We should have cleaning activities like in our communities also or in school. We should definitely start throwing garbage in a more decent manner. That's the word. And also encourage friends and schoolmates to like do what you're doing. You know, if one person starts it and the other one does it, it becomes a trend and everyone joins in.
Before I come to Flora, as you get ready, acha nifiche sura yako kidogo, ndio hiyo. Alex also says by investing in tactical actions like afforestation and reforestation, geothermal energy production, and other clean energy development, as well as climate smart agriculture and drought management, I have faith that the government is making an effort and working to adhere to its climate change strategies. Flora.
I'd say we should bring this conversation closer home. I mean, how often do we hear those around us speak about climate change? I was shocked today. I'm talking to my friend about this debate I'm going to be in. It's about climate change. And he had a lot to share on climate change. So, how often do you talk to your friends, your close friends, about climate change? Do they even know what climate change is? Do they understand the impact, the repercussions of climate change? So we should try bring these discussions home. Try engage your friends, your family on climate change, and the cycle will continue. The more you keep quiet and keep it to yourself and assume, oh, young people don't care about climate change, the more young people out there will not care because they have no one to speak this thing to them about. So let's bring the discussion back home. Bring it to your normal setting, to your surrounding. Young people today, most of them are on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. There's nowhere that young people are not. Bring the discussions there, speak about it. Trust you me, you might feel like they're not listening, but someone out there is listening. And another thing I'll add, and finally, this thing of it's bad manners. If you are a young person out there, now you meet someone that's throwing litter just anyhowly, don't be afraid. Please tell them it's wrong. You don't do that. You just don't throw things anyhowly. I do that and people think it's crazy. Me, I'll tell you, whether you are an adult or a young person, I'll tell you it's wrong. You need to know it's wrong. Get angry knowing you've done a wrong thing. So let's speak out. Let's be vocal. Let's go out there and speak about climate change. At the end of it all, it's affecting all of us. It does not care your age. It does not care your rank. It does not care who you are. If there's no food, we suffer, all of us. If we are breathing bad air, all of us are suffering. So speak out. Don't be afraid to speak about climate change and its repercussions and how we can make our environment better. Thank you.
And maybe because now you are all watching and challenging young people to do something, Fiona, maybe talk to, maybe pass some, acha niwapatie time basi mlianza na salamu. Hebu salimini watu wa campus zenyu niwaambieni wa take action. Pass some greetings to maybe a few members in your university.
Specific individuals.
I'm at a group of people wale wenye unajua pia are doing something amazing things.
I'd actually like to pass greeting to a certain girl in our school called Stacy Ogola. She's involved in many initiatives. I think she's in a club that they are involved in matters to do with climate. I'd like to commend her and all the groups in JKUAT that are focusing on climate change. Yeah, that is commendable of them.
Okay, asante. Nilijua lazima mko na watu wangwana kabisa ndani ya shule. Simon, USIU?
I'd like to pass on greetings to some of my friends, specifically Brian Juguna and Aisha Ahmed, and to the general pharmacy faculty in USIU for trying to come up with better ways to manufacture drugs without necessarily impacting the environment, and any clubs, affiliated with the climate change action in the place.
Asante sana. Whitney?
Well, I'd like to pass greetings to Martin Miner, Elena. Like I can see he's very active actually, and all the students back in school. Okay, I'm still in 1.1, so I haven't come across such groups, but yeah, I've heard it from Fiona, and it's amazing.
Asante sana. Josephine Flora.
Okay, sisi tulitoka shule kitambo, so I've not been in school for like 3 years. We've been studying from home. So I'll pass my shout outs to my friends that are doing good work out here on issues climate change. So shout out to Alex, who's been doing a good job out here. Another friend of mine called David, and also my sister Faith. She's very, very into this thing of climate change. So, and also to me and the panelists. Shout out to all of you. Keep up the good work.
Asanteni sana. You are amazing people. You are wonderful people. You know, COP27, the 27th conference of parties is happening in Africa, happening at Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. Yeah, and I know so many Kenyans will get an opportunity of going to be part of this conference. I was part of a certain certain conversation last week, and somebody told me every time young Kenyans get an opportunity to attend this kind of conferences, that is usually the time for them to explore those cities, and they don't spend most of their time at the conference. Those will have an opportunity to represent Kenya this time around. Someone is reminding us here that please stick to the agenda. There's time to explore Cairo and other cities in Egypt, but for now, mkienda kwa hii, please listen to what is being discussed pale so that mrudi home mtuambie nini inafanyika pale. COP27 is just a follow-up of COP26, and the goals karibu tuzifanane because they're just more follow-ups. In COP26 that happened last year, the conversation was revolving around adaptation, mitigation, collaboration, and of course the climate finance. But this time around, the issues are now revolving around bridging the mitigation gap to help limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. We are talking about delivering high quality and scaled up finance flows, especially to the most vulnerable. We're also talking about enhancing efforts to implement adaptation measures. Yes, so now it's not just about adaptation, but efforts to implement the adaptation measures to ensure that we are adapting to the changes that are happening. Number 4, we are talking about securing finance for loss and damage. We're also talking about implementing the Paris rulebook to hold countries and non-state actors accountable. Yeah, some people will say Paris or Paris. That is the agreement that was done in Paris, in France. So these conversations are being talked about. So majorly, COP27 is revolving around finance adaptation, the ambition to achieve some of the plans that we are talking about, loss and damage, and of course the Paris Agreement. These are the greatest conversations happening this year. If you get an opportunity to represent Kenya, please represent as well. To everyone who has been part of this conversation since Monday, massive blessings to you. Yeah, you people did some amazing research. Young Kenyans all brought together to talk about matters climate change, from the communication that we talked about to food security, energy, and today talking about our politics. You are students in different universities. To those who are watching from home, there are hundreds who have been watching and commenting on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You have the power. The power is right in our hands right now. We can choose to blame the leaders and be lied to that we are the leaders of tomorrow, but remember, tomorrow never comes because today is that tomorrow. You are the student leaders in your school. Start practicing, start taking action. The future that we are talking about is ours. To Hand Saddle Foundation and the Regional Sustainability Network, we are really humbled for walking this journey with us. A big shout out to my friend and colleague, Colista, wherever you are. If you're listening to this conversation, you're amazing people. And also a big shout out to all the members of the Regional Sustainability Network in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Democratic Republic of Congo, Togo, Djibouti, Ghana, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Namibia, and of course the homeland Kenya. You are great people. To Hand Saddle team, Hand Saddle Foundation team, asanteni sana. To all the debaters, mbarikiwe sana. Let's keep the fight and make our planet a better place to live in. Good night, everyone.
Good night.